Hi, everyone. Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. Today on the podcast, I'm talking to Kevin Gibbon, the co-founder and CEO of Airhouse. We talk about growing up with curiosity and a love of technology, the Uberification of everything, being introduced as the next Jeff Bezos, the dramatic rise and fall of his first company, and why you should focus on solutions 10 times better.
A lot of people get wrong by trying to ride the wave of AI because it's cool or something, but they don't really understand what exactly it is. But like, try to go deep in an area, try to truly understand a customer, try to really build something that's 10 times better than anything else that exists.
This was a great conversation, and I hope you love it as much as I did. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
I've been looking forward to this, and you heard a little bit in my intro teaser about Kevin and our conversation, but I want to tell you a little bit more about him so you can get as excited as I am to have him on the show today. So sometimes the misplaced step offers the most profound and lasting insight. I hear you there, man, by the way. Innately entrepreneurial, Airhouse CEO and co-founder Kevin Gibbon got his start in tech, developing software for major aerospace players like Boeing and Raytheon. After a few years, he set out to carve his own path, building Shyp, SHYP, and attracting a lot of funding, $62 million in funding, landing on Fast Company's 50 most innovative companies list, and probably a whole lot of other accolades. And unfortunately, Shyp was a bright star that ultimately burned out. But Kevin walked away from the experience equipped with reams of priceless insight. And now at Airhouse, he's applying that insight to revolutionize the way that direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands scale logistics. So we are going to be talking about not just that, but this whole entrepreneurial journey from the lens of a two-time founder, which I consider myself to be as well, Kevin.
That's great.
Although not in tech, just in it's more boring service businesses.
It still counts.
It still counts. Thank you for that. You can connect with Kevin. I mean, his Twitter handle is his name, Kevin Gibbon, Gibbon. It's also where you can get him on LinkedIn. Is there another place you like people to connect with you, Kevin?
Yeah, I actually have a podcast with second-time founders. So it's called Second Time Founders, and it's available on Spotify and iTunes, and so you search that as well. And it's around a few of my friends that are second-time venture backed founders, and we're just trying to demystify what it's like to run a venture-backed company and all the ups and downs that come with it, and to hopefully help out some first-time founders.
And how do you manage it? Like you got 4 people, as I understand it, and it has an all-in type look to it. I don't know if it's an all-in. I have not listened to it yet, but I don't know if it's an all-in type. How do you manage it? Like, who's the moderator, and how do you guys? Because that's tough when you have 4 people. I have a tough time managing myself and you know?
Right. We don't have any external help. I do a 1 hour a week, produce it in. We use Riverside and Descript, and then I just publish it on all the platforms. So I take 1 hour out of my week to do that, and also 1 hour out of my week to record the podcast. And we do consider our host, Julian, his previous company was called Breather, and his next one right now is called Practice.
Okay.
And then it's a shared responsibility between kind of the 4 of us. We do it at the same time every week. So it's super simple. And then, but we also bring in other guests as well. So other founders that have done something, and it definitely is much different than the all-in, where I think that it's from that was definitely an inspiration. This is supposed to be from a founder's perspective versus an investor's perspective, and just talking about our journey.
Nice. Second Time Founders podcast. Check it out. Oh, and you can also, his company's website is airhouse.io if you want to check out what they're doing there. So Kevin, I start every podcast with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
That's a big question. How did it happen? I think It happened with a deep level of curiosity and loving technology. I think that's kind of what has brought me to where I am now. From, as you mentioned, working for larger companies when I was just coming out of my computer science schooling to moving to the Bay Area. So I've been here about 10 years to starting my last company, Shyp, which then led into, unfortunately, that was a company that did not succeed, and now coming to Airhouse. But I think that the underlying piece that's how I've got here is just love for technology, love for solving problems in very unique ways, and just a curiosity on like what is possible.
And where did that come from? Like, can you trace the origins of, like, what was the first technology that you loved, Kevin? And then let's explore the curiosity after that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you're born with curiosity. I could definitely trace back to like taking every single gift or remote control apart and understanding how it worked and rebuilding them back to building my first websites online and GeoCities or whatever, and then building them for other people. I just really loved just the building aspect of things. And I also do on the side, I consider myself like, not so much anymore, but like I've taken apart and rebuilt cars and stuff around the house. And so built things from nothing. And I don't know, I'm not sure exactly where that kind of like builder mentality comes from, but it definitely has always been with me as long as I can remember.
So you're a software and a hardware person.
Yeah, kind of. Haven't built any consumer electronics, but yeah, if you count building cars as one of them, yeah, definitely a builder.
What kind of cars do you like? What kind of cars were you building or rebuilding?
So at the time, I was actually into like 4x4 trucks. So and big lift kits and that kind of stuff, and 4-wheel drive and all that went into that, and swapping engines out and transmissions and axles and all that kind of stuff. And it was just, I think probably what drew me in was just I where I grew up, that was just kind of like the hobby that a lot of people did. And I kind of just like, but what I really loved about that was like the building aspect of it. It's like I was very curious on like doing something myself and always like building something.
Got it. And where was it that you grew up, Kevin?
So I grew up in a suburb outside of Vancouver, Canada.
Okay. And any racing of those trucks you were
No
building,
racing, but definitely something that I'm interested in doing now.
Oh, what do you want to race? What, same type of thing or something different?
I honestly don't know. Right now, I don't have a lot of. So I have two small kids and running a company, so I don't have a lot of spare time.
Sure.
But I'd love to get into track racing one day. Would be a cool hobby.
Have you done like the racing schools, like Skip Barber or something like that?
Not yet. No, definitely something that I would love to do though.
Oh, so much fun! I've done that a couple of times. So much fun. Definitely gives you an appreciation for what it's like to be a fake racer and how hard that is compared to what you actually see.
Right.
How fast they're going.
Right. Yeah. On TV, it doesn't look the same as I'm sure as it is in person.
No, it rips your face off in person when they drive past you. On TV. It looks like they're going kind of slow until they hit each other and spin out for like a mile. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. So on the curiosity thing, you said you don't know if you're born with it. I see. It feels to me, and I'd love to get your impression on this. It feels to me like everybody's born with curiosity, and then life and people and rules and whatever start to sort of chip away at it. And it becomes something very difficult and unusual to maintain. Although I think if you ask most humans, they would say, "Yes, I'm curious," but I'd like to get your perspective on that.
I think, I think everybody has a certain level of curiosity built into them. I think that I definitely would skew more towards like the very curious, and just like really even to this day, like I hear about a company, like a great example would be like Chat GPT today, right? Like I'm just like not in my industry. I know nothing about AI or anything that's been going on, but just like I didn't want to just learn about that. What is this new technology? How can it improve whatever? How does it work?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like built into me. And yeah, I don't know. I just really love learning things, and it just doesn't. I can't stop myself from like going down rabbit holes and into other areas that I may not be like my core interest area.
Yeah. I was just prompting ChatGPT this morning on a couple of things that I was
Oh,
curious
cool.
about. So your curiosity, do you find it to be like when you're around people that you don't consider to be, or you don't feel like they're as curious as you, does that bother you, or does it
No,
reinforce a strength in you?
no,
Or,
not at all. I think
okay.
everybody has their strengths, and I think that, like, yeah, I'm have deep relationships with people that are not as curious, and they're kind of doing their own thing, and they've been doing the same thing for 10 years,
Right.
and that's fine, and we have common interests outside of that. But yeah, definitely, like I could see like my other friends that are more curious, and like they go into deeper things. Like I enjoy the conversations that we can have around just like new technologies or new way of doing things or just anything new. I really enjoy just learning a lot.
Got it. And when you went to college for computer science, I think, right?
Yep, that's right.
Um, did you know, or what did you think your path might be?
So before I went to college, I wanted to work in the gaming industry. And that was kind of, I loved video games. And I was very curious on how they're built. And then I went to college, and I just kind of fell in love with like the art of programming and how you can solve things in a very scalable way. And I took my first job right out of college. I think that was for Raytheon, who's a defense contractor, and just it's definitely not, now being in the startup world. I definitely wish I would have went startup world faster. But it was a very interesting company, and seeing that the stuff that I was able to code would go into production and there'd be actual users. And that was really exciting for me. And then that kind of progressed to other larger, I'd say that early on in my career, I definitely could not have predicted that I'd be starting my own like companies and scaling them and moving to down to San Francisco and doing all those things. But it was kind of a progression of just like being more interested. And when I actually started my first company, it was actually before Shyp, and it was in Vancouver. And that was just probably out of frustration of working for larger companies. And it was just like, at the time, like TechCrunch disrupt was a big thing, and I was
Hmm.
always an avid watcher, and I was just like, we could like, I convinced one of my colleagues to quit his job, and we got some friends and family money together, and we're like, we could build something. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. And this was before the days that YC was that big and everything like that. And it was just like, it was freeing. And we got hundreds of thousands of users on our first initial project. And like, that is like just this hit of dopamine that you get. It's just like, wow, like some code that like two people wrote can impact so many people. And I think that's where it changed from just being like a more or less like a relatively good paying job to like an obsession into like the startup world.
Yeah, it's like I mean, you're basically improving and or changing people's lives as a result of what you're doing. That's kind of there's a lot of things that can do that, but it's hard to think about that when you're in the middle of doing it sometimes, right? It's like
Right.
yeah. So this first startup that so your podcast isn't named correctly. You're actually a third.
Well, not everybody's a third, and I don't count my first company as a real company. It was just the two of us, and
Okay.
we didn't really get that far. But we took just some friends and family money. So I wouldn't consider, it definitely was not a venture backed
Yeah. Okay. Fair
company.
enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was at recently. I was at a conference in California called Abundance 360. I don't,
Yep.
are you familiar with it?
No,
Do you know the name Peter Diamandis?
I do not.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's a conference that focuses on abundance and abundance in artificial intelligence, robotics, health,
Yep.
food, everything. And one of the speakers, speaking of programming and ChatGPT, was the founder of Stable Diffusion, stability.ai. Ahmad Mustaq, I think is how you say his name. Do you know him, by the way?
I do not.
Okay. Anyway, he said this was a pretty bold statement. He said that in 5 years, AI will be doing all computer programming. There will be no more programmers. And as a programmer, so started
Yeah.
out in that, I just want to get your sense about that. What do you think about that statement?
I think it's false.
Yeah, I do too.
I
But
don't
why do
believe
you
it.
think it's false?
I think that there's all, so for one, there's a lot of legacy programs out there that even if something amazing like GitHub Copilot is a great example, able to autocomplete a lot of code, which I would say is probably one of the leaders in like AI code completion today. You're still going to have a lot of legacy systems like that.
Yeah.
Like even today, actually, and I'll bring this back into Airhouse. Like we work with a lot of partners that are even like probably our worst systems that we had to deal with is like dropping like a flat file, if anybody knows what that is, into an FTP server. So like I think the legacy stuff is going to be there for many decades. There's still, I think that, I don't know what percentage of computers that people use that are still on Windows 95, but I think that is going to take many decades. And I think that even if you're thinking about starting a startup from nothing and
Mhm.
thinking about having no code at all, I think that definitely will be the case for certain verticals, just like it is the case today, right? Like, so some of our customers, their brands, they use Shopify. They don't know how to code. They
Right.
don't know how to create an e-commerce site, but there's a SaaS solution that basically like replace the need for you to have an engineer to sell things online. So I think that there will be more places that it will help. I think it's going to like supercharge the programmer. But you're still, just like you if you use Chat GPT today, like I have this, it's funny, and like you see these like prompt engineers for different companies. It's like you still need to know what to enter into the
Yeah.
thing to get
Right.
the actual output out of there. And so I don't see even like starting a brand new startup, unless it's very, very simple. I don't see that it's going to take over programming. And I think in 5 years is way too early. And also I look at like older industries as well, like and I'm no expert in this industry, but like farming, for example, like
Right.
think of all the automation that's happened there. And I'm not even going to try to touch as far as like the automated machines or all that, but like you still have farmers,
Right.
and they still own land and they still run the machines, and they have to do maintenance and they have to do all these things. Like I think that this person who probably said that is just trying to make a bold statement, because it we're talking about it right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
The bold statements they get covered. Balaji, who he has another very bold statement bet that Bitcoin is going to go
Yeah.
to $1 million
Yeah.
in 90 days, and I think that that's not true. And also, but it's a good way to kind of like get your name out there, and like and start having people having discussions about a lot of these things,
Yeah.
which I think is important. I think that with programming, what is going to happen, it's going to be slow. but it is going to really just like other things in computing, just like how like AWS changed the nature of like you don't have to have your own data center. Like if like before, to run any size of company, like you had to have your own data center, and it would cost you, like at that time, you'd have to raise millions of dollars just to get the servers up and running. And now you don't. You have AWS, you have GCP, you have a lot of other outsourced solutions. So I think it's going to be the same sort of thing in the programming world, that AI is going to give more leverage to people, and all the same thing that like Airtable has done. I don't know if you're familiar with this company, but like
No.
they connect a lot of different data sources, or Retool is another great example. So they allow you to basically ingest your database, and for non-developers or developers to create faster components that like internal teams can use. So I think that that's going to happen. I don't know what the interface is going to be. It's definitely not going to be a voice interface, I don't think.
Okay.
I think the voice interface, like for chat GPT, I'm not a huge fan of the current interface. Just even comparing it to like Siri, and like the voice interaction is you just, it's very blurry, and ChatGPT has it is very impressive as a novelty,
Mm-hmm.
but to actually get like I've seen examples of like, oh, build me a settings page and allow my users to do X, Y, and Z. You're not going to continue. I don't believe that there's going to be a world that people are actually going to be like building interfaces off of that. I think it's going to be much more like, oh, there's going to be an interface that you're going to be using your computer for, and it's just going to give you more leverage.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the chat interface as something that is going to scale. Just the same way that if you remember, the bot craze was like the massive craze. Everybody, you could interact with all these bots. Facebook had all these bots, and then they turned out to be like, it's not a better interface than just like pointing and clicking and actually getting the exact thing that you wanted. But I think there's going to give a lot of AI in general will give a lot of leverage to programmers.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with you on the leverage part. So it's to me, it's like a giant optimizer. Like who's gonna figure out how to optimize it to help them, not replace them, right?
Right.
Like, and like right now, it's like a great get me started thing. That's what I like about it. You know, you type something, it gets you started in a pretty good way, and then you're like, oh, okay, that would have taken me a lot of time to get started. Now I can
exactly
use my own creativity to finish it.
Well, and also like you look at like, I think there's like 2 to 3 million open programming jobs right now. Like that's great.
Yeah.
That means that there's going to be more companies started. There's going to be more products out in the world. We're on a shortage for programmers, especially the highly skilled ones. So I think anything that could give us more leverage is a good thing.
Yeah. And that's a good example you use with the farming, because it was kind of like, up until 1850, farming was the same as it was in like, 1000 BC, but then,
right.
But then, factories started and they needed people to work there. So they came from the farms. And so the farmers had less people. So what do? Right. You got to fix the automate. You got to automate the farm. And then, and then now it's like the farming has to be so automated and so precise because nobody wants to, not a lot of people want to farm anymore. So it's like, you have to. Right. But interesting. It was an interesting example because food output has gone up tremendously with a lot less.
Right.
Farmers, right?
But, right, exactly. Yeah. That's I think it's gonna be the exact same thing that's gonna happen here.
Okay. Well, thanks for indulging me in that. That little rabbit hole. Okay, so you're working for these big companies. And what happens to bring the Shyp idea to life and the company to life?
So I think so. This was in the era. This is 2014, I think. This was in the era of the Uber for everything. So Uber and Lyft were, I don't know, a couple years old by then. And then the Uberification of all of these industries was happening. It happened in dry cleaning. Obviously, it happened in food, which has been very successful. It happened in a lot of unsuccessful categories. So storage is one of them. On-demand storage is not a thing that people want. And I knew something about the shipping industry based on when I was earlier in my teens. I was an eBay power seller, and I just knew how like terrible it was to sell things online. And I was just like looking for a better solution for that. I was at the time in Canada, you actually like you couldn't even get pickups from like the Canada Post. And I was just like, couldn't there be a better way? Couldn't there be like a magical, like take a picture of whatever you wanted to ship something, enter in where you wanted to go, and somebody would just magically pick it up. And so it was really inspired by the Uberization of everything, plus my knowledge of like how terrible shipping things were for like a small business.
And that when you were just saying that, it reminded me of the current Amazon drone commercials. I don't know if you've seen these, right? Where the guy, like, it's almost like he wishes for something, and all of a sudden this drone comes over and drops it in his lap.
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes later. So, came out of being an eBay power seller and struggling with like, how do you ship stuff? How do you get it? How do you receive it? How do you get it back? And so what did you put together? Like, how did you put a team together? How'd you get it off the ground?
It was myself and my co-founder, and we just built it ourselves, and we did the pickups ourselves, and we shipped off the thing. We put labels in boxes, and we dropped it off at USPS, and that was how we got our first few customers.
Okay, so it was like what, an app? How did people engage you, Kevin, and how did you get stuff? And yeah, I mean, that sounds very like a very manual thing, which it probably was.
Yeah.
Explain what it was like.
The initial version was a web-based app. How we got customers were basically advertising on Facebook. I think we advertise ourselves as the Uber for shipping. And that's like, if you have something that you want to ship out, like that pain point, it really resonates with you because you don't want to box something up and you don't want to wait in line in the post office and do all those things. And so we were able to get our first customers there. And then we did the everything outside of that. So the packaging, and then we would literally just drive the boxes, the pack boxes to USPS, and then everything was kind of housed inside of our Shyp application. So we'd send back track information to the customer, and we would charge them and all of those things.
So these were people, not businesses, that had something. They had something they wanted to ship.
Yep.
They interfaced with you. You went and got it.
Yep.
You took it somewhere, you packaged it, and then you took it to the place where they could ship it, post office or whatever.
Yeah. So we just basically did the task that they would have had to do themselves.
Okay. And then it must have worked because, as I mentioned, you ended up attracting a lot of funding, big valuation. How did you scale that thing?
So after that, we raised a seed round of investing to hire more engineers. We rented out a warehouse, and we hired people in the warehouse. We also hired people to pick up the items. And then we just built the application from there. And then we raised we got a lot of press, and I think press was like our main driver to get more customers, and also more venture capitalists and more employees and all of that. It really was a magical experience because it was taking something that you would have to like print off a printing label, which people don't have printers, and wait in line at the post office, to like it turned into an app where it's basically like literally like take a picture of whatever you want to ship. Like, we'll come and pick a bike up from you, and we'll take it back to our warehouse. We'll professionally package it, and then we'll get it in the hands of whichever carriers are also cheapest as well. And then we'll share all the tracking information. And it seems just like a really closed loop transaction, and people really they loved it.
And what was the value prop was convenience then, or what?
Yeah, totally. It was convenience. It was instead of you having to go and ship things, it was and I think there was definitely a novelty aspect of it as well. It was like how bad it was to wait in line at a post office, which you can compare that to like a DMV visit sometimes.
Yeah.
And then it's just like magically take a picture, enter in where it's going, and we would just come up, show up. We launched with on demand, so we would actually be there in 20 minutes. And it was just something that just like blew people's minds away.
Right. Huh. And so it was kind of like flywheel effect then that, people just started talking about it. And I know you said you were advertising on Facebook, but where did you get to the point where you're like, holy crap, we got stuff coming out of our ears here. What do we do? Like you said, you got a warehouse, but it's, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how you like the pickup part of it and taking it to the post office. There's a lot of moving parts in there. Plus you're meeting people like, oh, the person's not here. They said they were going to be here for me to pick up the bike or whatever.
Yeah. It was a really operationally challenging business that we hired people for specific roles, and they handled that part of the business. And we would have, if things went wrong, we would have exception handling, and we would figure out a way to improve the process over time. And I think that one important thing with people, hopefully anybody listening, like it seems like at scale it's just like this like monstrous thing. Like how can you get all of these things to work together? But it starts off very simple, and it's just like programming, right? You write your first function, then you write more functions and everything like that. It's the same thing with building a company. It's you get people, you hire people to take on this responsibility, and then it just kind of scales from there. Then you hire more people, you get a bigger warehouse, you start then going to different cities, you start launching them, you get more capital from venture capitalists, so you could hire more people, and that's kind of. But it's from its most basic part, it was like things they you got to be scrappy in the early days.
Yeah.
But like a lot of these things that do seem like insurmountable, like if I would have seen the operation, I wouldn't believe the operation that we were able to build like early on. But especially me being like a first time like venture backed entrepreneur, I was just like kind of blind to like all the challenges, and that's kind of like being naive a lot of the times is kind of a benefit.
An advantage,
it's an advantage. It's like you don't know what the problems you're gonna solve, and then problems come and then you gotta solve them. But if you were a FedEx or UPS, you're like, there's no way this is going to work. Like, there's no way we can't change our the way that we route things. We can't package stuff for people, but thinking from the ground up, you definitely can. I think that's a huge advantage of a startup.
And it's kind of like the big, UPS, FedEx, others. You have to do it their way, and your approach was, we're going to do it the way you want it.
Yeah,
it sounded like, right? There's always an opportunity there. The question is, is it a sustainable opportunity? Like, how do I get to the point where I eventually have to start doing it like everybody else because I learned that that's how you actually do it efficiently, or in a way that makes money or whatever. And was that what you encountered, or was?
I think that so ultimately, yeah, Shyp did not work out. I don't think that. I think a version of Shyp definitely could work. I think that it probably should be bootstrapped and it should be grown slowly. But I think that UPS and FedEx, and use any large company as an example, like they did the best thing that when they started that didn't exist before. And there's always going to be different companies that solve a problem better. Like, this is just the nature of business. You have incumbents get disrupted by startups all the time, or
Right.
maybe they're an additive and they're a partner, and that's the case with us at Shyp. But I think that we were just able to look at, and also I think like consumers or businesses, like their needs change as well. Like if you think back to like the software people were using in like the 2000s, like they for business software, like they expect a lot more now. And so like you have an opportunity to build better things for them now, and they'll migrate from their older school software solution to something newer that fits better with all the tools. I think that there's always things that are changing, in the technology, in what people expect, in looking at other companies like OpenAI. What are they doing? Like I think there's going to be a whole breed of other companies that are going to try to kind of catch that wave.
Right.
And things are always changing. And so I think that you as an entrepreneur have to like talk to customers, understand their pain points, and then build something. I'm a big believer in building something 10 times better than what their existing solution was. And I definitely know that was the case for Shyp. It was
Okay.
10 times, at least 10 times better. However, the company did not work out is because from a venture scale, like what venture, when you get into venture, you're looking for the venture capital is like, it's like rocket fuel. They want, they're betting that your company is going to be massive. It's going to be 100x
Yeah.
category leading company. It's going to disrupt the incumbents, all of that. And you need to know that going in. And unfortunately for us, we found a really good fit with Shyp for on the consumer side, but consumers just don't ship a lot of stuff. So where FedEx and UPS, they had to consumers, but also like what drives the majority of their business? E-commerce.
Yeah, right.
And so we did not serve that market really well, which actually I don't know if you want to pivot into what we're building now, but that's what kind of came out of Shyp into what we're building now at Airhouse.
So I do want to pivot there, but I have two questions for you before we
Please.
go there. So help me get into your head. You start this company and a few years later, you've got 50-60 million dollars in funding, and it's at a value that, let's say, maybe it's $250 million, right? And you and your founder are looking at yourselves and you're thinking, what are you thinking? Wow, this is so amazing. Or you're thinking, holy, what have we got ourselves into? Like, not many people that are listening to this, including me, can put myself in a situation where someone's given me $50 million plus to build out a business. And and on paper, I'm worth a lot of money as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about that?
I was feeling on top of the world. I thought that Shyp was going to become the next Uber. I thought, and also we had like the legendary investor John Doerr was on our board. So he was one of the first investors in Google and Amazon and a lot of other ones. He's a billionaire many times over. He would introduce me as like the next Jeff Bezos. And so that was definitely like my first, I hadn't really failed that much up until that point. So like my ego was there. I thought that we were going to do that. I thought that we were unstoppable. We were spending money at a rate that was ridiculous based on where our revenue was. But that was like, I think, a mistake of like a first-time venture entrepreneur. We saw our growth rate slow down and our spending. We did do some layoffs, but we didn't do them fast enough. And we tried to solve a lot of our problems with money. So we hired more senior executives to try to figure out what the problem is on like, why aren't we growing? It's like, no, there's actually not a market. The market's not big enough. Like, it's just really not. And there was a lot of learnings in that it was ultimately we pivoted late into, I think we probably had like $5 million left in the bank. And we pivoted towards serving more of the brands versus the consumers. But it was just too little too late. And there was a lot of history in the company. And we had a really big board at that time. And it's just really tough. And then that's why I tell like entrepreneurs, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted to start the podcast that I have now, like your advantage over other larger companies is like your ability to be nimble and be creative. And you could
Hmm.
do that when you're smaller. When you're bigger, and it's like you're steering a cruise ship versus like a very nimble small boat. And that is a massive advantage for startups over incumbents. And unfortunately, we thought that we were going to be the next Uber, and we built out the team accordingly. And we had people that were not able to really take the big risks and all of that. And I still believe like we also had, I would say we had amazing product fit, but we didn't have product market fit. And what I mean from that is that we weren't able to grow our users in a way that profitably made sense. And so we didn't have that pull from the market. It was very much like after we saturated a new market with consumers that loved our product, it was basically like flatline growth.
Okay.
And then it's just like, what do you do from there? And we tried a bunch of things, and we tried to improve the product a little bit here or there, but we had like a systemic issue, which was the market's just not that big for the service that we're offering, even though that the people who used it really loved it.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking, when you're talking about being nimble, I feel like there's a lot of strength in having little resources that promote being nimble. And it's easy to convince yourself that if only I had more money, I could even
Yeah,
be more
that's
nimble, right? I could even be more nimble. Yeah,
the wrong way of looking at it.
right. Because that the money comes with, like, that saying, like, you gotta burn the ships. Have you heard
Yeah,
that saying? Right?
yeah,
So with money, you never burn the ship. Like,
right.
right. So Kevin, you go from being, as you mentioned, like on top of the world, you got all this money, and then you figure out the product market fit doesn't work. You try all these things, and then ultimately
Yeah.
Shyp doesn't work. And so on top of the world, how are you feeling when Shyp, when it becomes evident that Shyp's not going to work? And then, well, that's first. And then second, how did you stay confident enough to then, start Airhouse? I mean, what was life like for you then?
So at the end of Shyp, we were pivoting into now what is a version of Airhouse,
Okay.
and it was actually working. So my confidence actually didn't dip.
No. Okay.
So while we had to like formally shut down Shyp, it kind of turned into Airhouse from all of our learnings. And so and honestly, it was me running on a lot of adrenaline at the time. Like I also was not in the financial position to not have a job. I didn't want to work for a large company again. And so I basically, the day that I was no longer affiliated with Shyp is when my co-founder, Sarah, we started Airhouse, and we were able to raise some seed capital and continue the journey, but in a much different way that we had with Shyp. With Shyp, we had a lot of overhead, a lot of capex and warehouses and physical infrastructure and everything like that. And we kind of turned that into what at Airhouse, which we saw our biggest customers were actually they were small e-commerce brands, and they were looking for quite a different solution. So they wanted somebody to store their items, and then when they actually they sold, to actually ship them. And that is an existing industry. It's called the 3PL industry,
Sure.
warehousing industry. And so I knew that that's what people wanted, a modern version of that, and also quality operations, which was a really big problem in the industry, and it still is today. And so it was really, that transition was like, there was no break, and my optimism, it really didn't decrease, because I was confident that I could build a company like at a big scale, and I knew that we just had the wrong target customer, and the to build like a venture scale business. And I was very confident in like just all the learnings, and like also like if you're taking venture capital and you're having to scale warehouses, that's not a good use of venture capital. Like venture capital, they say the hockey stick growth, right?
Right.
Like your growth needs to scale exponentially.
Exponentially, yeah.
You cannot scale warehouses exponentially and keep the same quality. And so that was a really big learning for me at Shyp, as far as, okay, I don't want to, wrong customer, not big enough market. We know how to, we built a really good product, but still it doesn't really matter because there's not enough people that are going to use it more frequently enough. Warehouses are definitely not something that you want to take venture capital money and scale it, because you're going to get to a point where it's just too much to manage. I'm a believer in, like, venture capital should be used for technology, but primarily bits scale a lot faster than atoms. And so that kind of led us into what we're doing at Airhouse, which is we take the partnership approach. So we don't actually own the warehouses. We work with digital first brands and we provide them fulfillment solutions. So we'll partner with 3PL, and we have many in our network. I think we have about 50 different warehouses across the globe today that we partner with. We'll be able to help you as a brand get your inventory inside one of those warehouses. And then we're the software that kind of links everything together. So you could be using 5 or 6 different locations. You could be using domestic or one of our international locations. And then we kind of just take care of all the complexity of partnering with them, and also figuring out who the best 3PLs are, which is a really hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But we know that because we actually have customers using that. And so it was all, to go back to your question, it just kind of like naturally flowed into this. But I'm not going to sit here and lie that there was not. I think probably probably a year or two into Airhouse is where when things actually were starting to work, that a lot of like the trauma that I went through at Shyp, and like being on top of the world to like being nothing, it kind of like hit me. But I think, yeah, and like mental health wise was not great. But I think the journey to kind of move towards Airhouse was just, I got to do this. Like, I'm running on adrenaline and all these things. And I'm like, I know like of everything, I know if we could build an asset free way that these brands can ship their stuff and not own the actual warehouses, like, this is a really, like, not only big business opportunity, but also like this is going to really help and change our customers' like lives, because they're spending so much of their times figuring out who they should work with. They have bad 3PLs. They're having to manage them. All of this is like very similar to what Amazon did for AWS. Before that, you had to actually like rent out computers and different servers and provision them and everything. And so I like to use that analogy into what we're building now at Airhouse.
Well, the way you just described that was definitely a like textbook example of the delusion that an entrepreneur needs in order to keep moving forward. Because a person without the delusion would have been, that stuff would have caught up to them right when it happened.
Right.
And you just kept moving. I'm wondering, Sarah was not your co-founder in Shyp, is that correct?
No, she worked for me at Shyp.
Okay.
Yeah.
How critical was she to, helping you maintain the confidence, the delusional optimism, all of the things that you needed to get Airhouse off the ground and keep it moving?
So critical. It was us. It was us, and she was running sales and marketing for a product that we hadn't publicly launched at Shyp, which is definitely a different version that we now built at Airhouse. But we're like, we both see this need. It's like brands are clamoring for the solution to something. So like we have something here, and like we don't want to stop. Like, we want to continue on.
Got it.
And I'm also a really big believer in, as an entrepreneur, especially a venture-backed entrepreneur, there's so many things that you need to. There's so many problems and different hurdles that you're going to have to get over. And so you should try to make as many things as easier as you possibly can. One of them for me was moving down to the Bay Area. and like being around people that were like-minded. Financing was definitely a lot easier. That was something that I made a decision with Shyp to move away from Vancouver. Another one was with Airhouse. Is like we could have started another company in a different area, but like we knew, and also like logistics is not I wouldn't say like I love like logistics itself, but we just have so much knowledge of this area in this problem. But what I do love is solving customers problems.
Right.
And so I tell every entrepreneur that I can, like, try to put yourself in the best position and make those hard calls. I still do recommend people moving to the Bay Area. I think there's like an infectiousness of just like really talented people and other entrepreneurs that you could go and get coffee with, and they're super open and will help you and all those things. But also, if you've been in an industry for 5 years and you know some secrets about it, like you should probably go and go down that path, even though that it may be painful. And I know other people that have been in other areas where they're just like, no, I want to start fresh. I just want to like remove, like get out of this industry. But my approach was like, yeah, there's some scar tissue there for sure. But like we know it better than most other people. And so we have a leg up on the competition.
You learned what didn't work. You learned the portions that did work. You had an idea of how to leverage the portions that did work, while you were leveraging very smart warehouse space that other people bought and paid for and were looking for customers. Right. So I think it sounds super, super smart. Can I just talk a little bit about how you got when all the stuff caught up to you?
Yeah.
How did it manifest itself, and how did you figure out, if you have, how to move past it? Because I know I have a lot of stuff that I haven't quite totally figured out yet. I feel like I'm pretty good at getting through stuff, but still, it's kind of little pieces hang on,
Yeah, I think that some things good. So I think that like my thirst for, I don't know if it's proving other people that I could do it, or proving to myself that I could do it and make a really big successful company. So I'd say that's probably on more of the positive side. But like on the mental health side, like it hit me like a ton of bricks. It came in like, I never had anxiety before. It came in the form of anxiety and panic attacks, and like that stuff still is an issue for me today. And it was through the trauma that I went through. How I get through that is like doing as much exercise as I can and meditate and doing all those things. But yeah, it definitely was like a traumatic event in my life. I think that it's really hard for an entrepreneur to not think of their company as like their own identity, and that's what I definitely did. So like when your company fails, it's like you failed.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not the same thing. But it's like mentally it's hard to separate those things. So it's something that I think I've definitely gotten past it mostly. But I think that it still does drive me to be like, look, I did this like really cool thing. Like you mentioned some of the accolades that we have from Shyp. Like Airhouse is going to be much more successful based on all of my learnings, and I want to go and see what that journey is going to be like.
And thanks for sharing that, because it's weird what life will do to you.
Yeah,
it's weird, and as an entrepreneur, it's even weirder. And there's not many people you can talk about, and like you being able to talk about that probably wasn't something that was just like, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm going to start talking about it, right? It was probably something you wanted to, stuff back down and wherever it was coming from, and just hope it goes away. And
yeah, a little bit, but also I like to, and this is one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is well, and also me, like us doing this podcast right now, but also myself having my own.
Yeah,
I want to share a lot of these things. Like I think like entrepreneurship is really lonely, and if you can listen to other people that have been through similar things, it makes it less lonely. If you can develop a friendships with other people going through the same pain points you can, that's even less lonelier. But it definitely is really lonely. But all of us kind of suffer the same things ourselves. But
Yeah.
also, I will not I don't want to say entrepreneurship is like the worst thing ever. Like I'm doing exactly what I want. What are the positives of being entrepreneurs? Like you get to build something from nothing. That is incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
You get to make the decisions that could be the right ones, the wrong ones. That's really empowering. So I think that we focus a lot on like what didn't go well at Shyp and my learnings, but like I'm a super optimist. And I love what I'm doing. And I don't think I could do anything else.
I think, as you were talking through that, what was going through my mind is I think one of the breakthroughs for entrepreneurs to really be successful is to get comfortable, not only talking about, how they're feeling, but also being comfortable saying, I don't know. And I need some help.
Yes.
Because, this like nose to the grindstone, grit it through delusional optimism, all that gets you so far. And then, reality hits sometimes, and you just don't know. And when you're around like-minded people who are doing similar type things, they get that. They get that, and as you said, I found most entrepreneurs are very willing to help other entrepreneurs
totally
get through it.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, really like, dude, I don't want to see you go through that. I'll help you however I can. Without obligation, without, or
no strings attached. Yeah.
Right? No strings attached.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, thank you so much for making time for me. Is there something that I didn't ask you or that you'd like to leave with me and the folks who are listening before we call it a day?
I think for all the entrepreneurs out there, I think that really focus on customers and building a solution that truly is 10 times better than what exists out there. I think that's really like the magic of creating something from nothing that I think a lot of people get wrong by trying to ride the wave of AI because it's cool or something, but they don't really understand what exactly it is. But like, try to go deep in an area, try to truly understand a customer, try to really build something that's 10 times better than anything else that exists. And I think if you do that and focus on your customers and continue listening, I think your chances of success will be a lot higher.
Nice. Great advice. Well, Kevin, I wish you tremendous success with Airhouse, and your podcast, Second Time Founders podcast.
Yes.
Airhouse.io if you want to find out more about what Kevin is up to. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Mike. It was a blast.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Ownershift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller. And I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.